Hi everyone, we're going to paint some rocks today. We're going to learn how to paint rocks. Rocks can be really challenging, but it's really easy, and after I teach this, hopefully it'll be even easier for you. This is a number 6 flat tip brush, so I'm going to use that. Rocks, it's really about mixing, and it's really about doing wet on wet. These are acrylics, so I have titanium white, phthalo blue, Mars black, chrome yellow, and bright red. I'll be mixing these colors and all the colors that I need. A lot of people, they go directly into black, and the thing is, I'm going to do different things. So here's blue and red. Here's like one just blue and red. Okay. Here's another one. Maybe it's in the corner. Again, I'm using purple. I'll show you the difference between that and something that's black. Maybe I'll just do a different shape here. So you can see, the black versus the purple. They're pretty similar. A lot of times we use, I use purple instead of black. Rarely do I use black or white. I mix with white, but I use white at the very end for like my highlights. A lot of people will go directly into white. You ever notice with like with portraits, like they do the whites of the eyes in white, and rarely are they white, usually like gray or purple or, a darker color to make them look a little bit more natural. Okay, so I've got my shape. What a lot of people do is they'll try to do a rock and they'll make it round like this. And it's okay to make it round, but if it's in the water, it's going to be flat on the bottom like this. It's in the water usually. Okay, it's going to be flat. You can do a round rock like this. If you want to do a round rock like that, you're probably going to have other round rocks, around it. And what separates it is that, some are lighter than others. So if I added a little bit of white to this, and white to this, white to the tip, you can see the gray separates them, right? That you have 3 rocks there already, just by putting like a little bit of highlight, on the top. So if I went more with the highlight here, got a little bit of white here, a little bit of white on the top, and a little bit of white here. Now you'll notice if I added a little bit more black, a little bit more contrast in here where I have the separation of the rocks, then you can really see them. Okay. So you can see here, the highlight is here, the highlight is here, and the highlight is here. And then that contrast, the black, is in the middle and kind of gives you a nice separation of rocks. And you can continue playing and doing that as long as you want. There's, nature is all things, and so I can make, round shapes. I can make, more rectangular shapes. I can do all kinds of things in here. And as long as I have a little bit of contrast, a little bit of a highlight coming through, it works. And I have the contrast around where the other rocks are, they will always work. So I've got a little highlight here. So now you see like, now I have like a stack of rocks. And just kind of like doing a little highlight here, a little highlight here. And again, this is just black and white, right? Just black and white. And merge rocks together. I can separate a rock by putting a little bit of black, contrast color back in, and it separates them. And then the highlight color, makes it pop. So you can see all the different like stack of rocks that I have there. And again, it's just shapes with, just think of them as shapes, right? And think of them as shadow and highlight. And so I've got my dark color in and I put a little highlight on the top. Okay, so I've got the purple one here. I'm going to add some orange. I'm going to add some orange highlights to this. To the purple. All through here. Looks kind of cool. So you can see that I added that in the purple there. You can see it. And then what I like to do is when I add the highlight colors, I like to put my purple back in and see what I'm going to get. You know, rocks are all things, so I don't have to I don't have to worry about what I'm going to get because, rocks are all things. They come in all kinds of different shapes, so I can put a little bit of contrast back in here like this, and leave a little bit of the orange where I want it. You can see it's like very impressionist how it looks, right? Very impressionist. I got a little bit of the orange in there, a little bit of the purple. So you can play around and you can get highlights and shadow. I just put my purple back in around the orange and I got a really nice, neat blend. It was really cool. All right. So how about like a cliff rock? So again, I can go purple, maybe a little bit of black, and do like a big cliff rock like this. Maybe it has a hole in the center, like some of the Monet paintings, right? That's like a hole in the center. So I'm just filling it in. What a lot of people do is the leg is never like robust enough. It doesn't look like it will hold. So you want to make sure that you're adding enough weight to the leg on the other side so it looks like it can hold it. And I'm going to leave a little hole in the center, and I put a little bit more like a heavier black, around it. And now, as I added a little bit more weight to it, you can see that it looks like, it can hold itself up there, right? Added a little bit more weight. Okay. Again, I can add orange highlights and do the same thing again. It's kind of fun. You don't know what you're going to get. And that's the idea with painting is you want to stay looser. You want to stay looser and you want to kind of see what you're going to get. And not be so married to the end result. I do use reference material. I do use photos sometimes and things. But again, I still want my painting to look different than the photo. I want to be able to creatively express myself, my uniqueness, and who I am by how I paint rather than trying to copy something. And you try to copy something, you get too tight and not as expressive. So you can see how I left a little bit of black in the center and a little bit of orange highlights, and you can see how that's starting to stand out and look kind of cool. And again, I can put blacks back in, put a little bit of black back in and see what I get. I can put some black like up in here in the corner. I could put some black like up in here just to create some contrast. Some black in here. Maybe, at the bottom, there's always like a lot of black at the bottom. And what's nice too is, just to make it look a little bit more realistic, I can take like a nice light green, and I could pretend like there's a little bit of water in there. Maybe some water around here on the side too, like this. But you can see how that makes a big difference when I'm painting, right? Makes a big difference. Now I've got a lot of contrast and some highlights, and it really starts to look like a rock. So rocks are about playing. Rocks are about being fearless. Rocks are about having fun. Rocks are not about being tight, loose with the brush. Not always knowing what you're going to get is the really nice surprise about it, is that, you don't always know. You don't always know. But if you play enough, you're going to get a really nice result, and you're going to get things that you really enjoy. And remember, rocks in the water, I'll put some water in here so you guys can see. Rocks in the water are always flat. Always flat. So, always flat. So if it's in the water like this, surrounded, it's always flat at the bottom, always. No matter what the shape is of the rock, it's always flat at the bottom. Okay? It's got some water in there, the rock's always flat at the bottom. And then what's nice is you can do some waves. It's always nice though, don't go straight in with white. Use your watercolor, add some white to the, so I have light green, add some white to that and do some waves like that underneath the rock. And don't do it even, right? Don't do it even. And then you can add some highlights.